Today, we'll be looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that ended in unimaginable tragedy. The first will leave you haunted by the thought of being trapped with no way out. The second proves that even the most experienced explorers aren't immune to disaster. And the last story is a chilling reminder of how one small mistake can seal your fate. As always, viewer discretion is advised. In post-war Europe, caving was exploding in popularity, with explorers pushing into deeper and deadlier cave systems. One of the most challenging was the Gouffre de la Pierre Saint-Martin in the French Pyrenees, a vast, dangerous network of vertical shafts and narrow passages. Leading the 1952 expedition was Harun Tazieff, a fearless caver known for his groundbreaking explorations. One of his key team members was Marcel Lubens, an experienced caver and close friend. Their mission was simple yet risky: explore and map the cave's unexplored vertical shafts, venturing deeper than anyone had gone before. Everything seemed to be in place as they geared up and prepared to descend into the pitch-black abyss. On August 14, 1952, the expedition reached a critical point. Marcel Lubens was ascending one of the cave's massive vertical shafts, secured to a makeshift winch system designed to hoist him up the unforgiving rock face. The atmosphere was tense, with every creak of the equipment echoing through the cavern. As the winch groaned and strained, Lubens was about halfway up, suspended dozens of meters above the cave floor, when disaster struck. Suddenly, a loud snap pierced the air. The climbing rope had failed. In an instant, Lubens plummeted 80 meters, 262 feet, through the pitch-black void, his body crashing against the jagged rock walls before landing with a bone-shattering thud. His teammates froze, processing what they'd just witnessed. When they rushed to his side, the severity of his injuries became painfully clear. Lubens was alive, somehow conscious. But his body was broken. His spine was severely injured, with his skull fractured. The team was in shock, but they had to act quickly. As they gathered around him, they faced a grim reality. Getting Lubens out alive seemed almost impossible. Meanwhile, the looming threat of another equipment failure kept everyone on edge, as one wrong move could mean more casualties. In the silence that followed the fall, the rescue effort began. The team quickly gathered their limited medical supplies and carefully lowered them down to Lubens. The severity of his spinal injuries meant that even the slightest movement could be fatal. Communication between the surface and the rescue team was chaotic. The narrow passageways and jagged rock formations distorted voices, making it nearly impossible to coordinate efforts. The rescuers knew that every passing minute decreased Lubens' chances of survival, but they couldn't afford to rush and risk another fall or equipment failure. Desperate to lift him out, the team rigged a makeshift stretcher, fashioning a pulley system to hoist him up. But the system failed under the weight and the awkward angles, leaving them back at square one. Hours dragged on, and as Lubens' condition continued to deteriorate, it became painfully clear that his injuries were beyond help. The realization hit hard. No amount of effort would be enough to save him. After enduring days of unimaginable pain, Marcel Lubens finally succumbed to his injuries deep within the cave. His fellow explorers, devastated and exhausted, had no choice but to leave his body in the cave. Retrieving it safely was simply impossible, given the harsh conditions and the severity of the descent. The tragedy of Marcel Lubens sent shockwaves through the caving community. Experts and cavers were forced to confront the brutal reality of the dangers they faced. In the years that followed, his death became a sad catalyst for change, leading to significant improvements in safety protocols and equipment design. While Lubens' name remains etched into the history of cave exploration, his story also serves as a shocking reminder of how quickly ambition can turn to tragedy. Yet, despite all the lessons learned, his was far from the last time a caving expedition would end in unthinkable despair. On March 22, 1959, a young geology student named Neil Moss set out on an ambitious exploration of Peak Cavern, an ancient and sprawling cave system nestled in the rugged hills of Derbyshire, England. Known to locals as the Devil's Arse, Peak Cavern earned its sinister nickname from the eerie, rumbling noises that echoed from deep within, making it both a challenge and a fascination for adventurous cavers. Neil Moss, just 20 years old, was not new to caving. Armed with a youthful determination and a keen curiosity for geology, he assembled a small team and ventured into the cavern, determined to reach a newly discovered vertical shaft that descended deeper than most dared to go. The air inside the cave was thick and musty, with the faint scent of damp earth lingering as the group navigated the jagged, winding passages. Every sound, whether the scraping of boots against stone or the occasional drip of water, seemed amplified, bouncing off the rough limestone walls. As Neil led the way, his headlamp cut through the suffocating darkness, illuminating twisted rock formations and narrow crevices. The deeper they ventured, the more the cave seemed to tighten around them, as if the ancient stone itself resisted their intrusion. Finally, they arrived at the mouth of the new shaft, a narrow, vertical drop that beckoned with the promise of unexplored depths. Without hesitation, Neil prepared for the descent. He squeezed his tall, lean frame into the narrow opening, using his feet and back to brace himself against the rock walls as he inched downward. The light from his helmet flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced around him. Inch by inch, he lowered himself into the shaft, the stone pressing against his shoulders and ribs as the walls narrowed even more. Suddenly, disaster struck. One wrong shift, and Neil's body slipped into an even tighter space, his shoulders and chest wedged against unforgiving rock. Panic surged as he tried to push himself back up, but his arms were pinned to his sides, completely immobilized. His breathing grew rapid, echoing in the confined space as he realized the gravity of his situation. Shouting for help, his teammates scrambled to respond, but there was no room to maneuver, no way to reach him from above or below. The cold, suffocating air of the shaft seemed to tighten like a vice, and Neil struggled to keep his composure as fatigue set in. His calls became fainter, more strained, as he battled to stay conscious. The dark reality sank in. He was trapped, and the unforgiving cavern showed no mercy. News of the incident spread quickly, and soon, cave rescue experts from all over the region, along with local miners familiar with tight spaces, were at Peak Cavern. The entrance to the cave became a chaotic scene, rescuers coordinating, equipment being hauled in, and ropes and pulleys being prepared. Every second mattered as they planned their approach. One of the first priorities was to get Neil fresh air, as the shaft was notorious for its dangerously high carbon dioxide levels. Rescuers lowered a narrow pipe down the shaft to pump oxygen to him, hoping to buy time while they figured out how to free him. They shouted words of encouragement down the passage, trying to keep his morale up, but Neil's responses were faint, weak, gasping, and filled with fear. Several rescuers took turns attempting to reach him, squeezing into the tight gap with harnesses and makeshift tools to try and dislodge him. Each attempt ended the same way. No progress, just more exhaustion and frustration. He had mistakenly moved a boulder in part of the tunnel, which then trapped the ladder, preventing him being pulled up by rescuers. The distance between the rungs of the ladder was too great for someone of his height to reach through the remaining gap. The cave seemed to be fighting back, holding Neil in a death grip. As the hours dragged on, it became painfully clear that the carbon dioxide levels were rising, despite their best efforts to pump in fresh air. The gas, heavier than oxygen, settled at the bottom of the shaft, suffocating any hope of prolonged survival. Rescuers tried to keep talking to Neil, asking him to move his legs or shift his body, anything to create space, but his voice grew weaker and less coherent, drifting into silence. Desperation took hold as they realized that Neil's position was simply too tight to pull him out, without risking further injury, or worse. Despite every effort, the shaft was unforgiving, and the cruel reality was becoming more and more true. Extraction was looking more and more impossible. As the long, agonizing hours stretched on, the rescuers knew they were fighting a losing battle. Neil's faint, gasping breaths grew weaker until they could no longer hear his voice at all. Desperation turned to despair as the reality set in. He was no longer responding. The deadly carbon dioxide had finally overwhelmed him, claiming his life while he remained hopelessly wedged in the rock's unyielding grip. When the grim news broke to those at the surface, a heavy silence fell over the rescue site. Exhausted and heartbroken, the rescuers exchanged weary, defeated glances, knowing they had done everything within human capability to save him. But, in the end, the cave had refused to release its hold on Neil Moss. Faced with the unimaginable decision of how to proceed, authorities consulted with caving experts and, most importantly, with Neil's grieving family, realizing that any further attempts to retrieve the body would be both dangerous and futile. His family made a heartbreaking request to leave him where he had perished. It was a decision made out of respect and safety, acknowledging that disturbing the cave further would risk more lives. In the days that followed, the shaft where Neil lost his life was sealed permanently, encasing both his body and the tragic memory of the failed rescue. The closure served not only as a memorial to the young caver, but also as a sad reminder of the unforgiving nature of underground exploration. Neil Moss's tragic fate left an indelible mark on the world of caving. To this day, his body remains sealed within Peak Cavern, forever entombed in the narrow shaft that became his final resting place. The decision to leave him there wasn't taken lightly, but it ultimately honored the family's wishes while also acknowledging the profound risks involved in any further recovery efforts. The sealed shaft serves as a permanent memorial, a silent proof to the unforgiving nature of underground exploration. It's a stark, jarring reminder to those who venture into the depths that even the most well-prepared expeditions can end in catastrophe. Visitors to Peak Cavern are often unaware of the grim history hidden deep within, but for those who know the story, the cave's atmosphere carries an unsettling weight. In the wake of Neil's death, the caving community was forced to confront the harsh realities of their passion. Safety protocols were scrutinized and revamped, particularly regarding ventilation and rescue planning. Experts called for better precautions when dealing with the invisible dangers of caves, like rising carbon dioxide levels. Neil's death became more than just a tragic loss. It was a turning point that pushed the caving world to prioritize safety and caution. While Neil Moss's fate is etched into the dark history of Peak Cavern, it wasn't the last time a seemingly ordinary cave exploration would end in unthinkable despair. On February 13, 1965, James Mitchell, a 23-year-old scientist and passionate caver, arrived at Schroeder's Pants Cave in upstate New York. The cave, known for its cramped passages and unforgiving terrain, had been discovered 18 years earlier by two cavers who named it after the terror. One of them received in his trousers during the initial exploration. Despite the snowfall that day, the temperature had been unusually warm for the past week, causing snowmelt to flood the cave's passages with icy water. Unaware of the danger ahead, Mitchell entered the cave with two companions. They navigated through the narrow, pitch-black corridors, squeezing through tight spaces until they reached an open chamber. At the center of the chamber, a vertical shaft dropped 80 feet into a deeper cave. A small river poured down the shaft at an alarming rate of around 10 gallons per minute, filling the chamber with the roar of cascading water. Confident in his abilities, Mitchell secured his safety line, equipped with a waist harness and foot strap, and began his descent into the shaft. As he lowered himself, his arm became trapped when the line snagged on something unseen. He struggled to free himself, trying to shake loose from the hold, but the rope remained caught. Realizing the danger, he attempted to climb back up, but the freezing water had soaked his gloves and numbed his hands, making it nearly impossible to grip the rope. The relentless stream poured over his head, soaking him to the bone and draining his strength. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to call out for help, his voice muffled by the roar of the water. Hearing his cries for help, his companions rushed to the edge of the shaft and spotted Mitchell trapped below. They quickly assessed the situation and tried to pull him back up, but his soaked clothing and frozen hands made it nearly impossible for him to assist in his own rescue. For 45 agonizing minutes, they fought against the freezing water and the immense weight of Mitchell's body, but their combined strength wasn't enough. Mitchell's body remained wedged in the shaft, suspended by the safety line, with one arm pinned awkwardly against the rock face. The rescuers shouted encouragement, desperately hoping he could muster the strength to climb back up, but the cold had sapped his energy. Eventually, he stopped responding altogether, his head drooping under the relentless barrage of icy water. Realizing they needed professional help, one of his companions scrambled out of the cave to contact authorities. A rescue team of caving experts and local volunteers was assembled, but hours had already passed since Mitchell's initial fall. Upon arrival, the rescuers immediately understood the difficult nature of the situation. Working quickly, they set up more stable ropes and tried to rappel down to reach him. However, the torrent of water made it almost impossible to approach safely. Rescuers called out to Mitchell repeatedly, but he remained unresponsive. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't dislodge him or find a way to safely maneuver around the shaft's jagged edges. With hypothermia setting in and the water continuing to pound his lifeless body, hope for a successful rescue began to fade. After hours of relentless effort, the rescue team faced the grim reality that Mitchell was no longer showing signs of life. The relentless flow of icy water had undoubtedly taken its toll, and his body remained immovable, wedged tightly in the shaft. Rescuers had exhausted every possible method to reach him, but the narrow passage and hazardous conditions left them with no viable options. Eventually, the decision was made to halt the rescue operation. Authorities consulted with experts and Mitchell's family, who understood the futility and extreme danger of continuing the extraction. The cave was left undisturbed for several days to allow water levels to recede, but Mitchell's body remained firmly stuck, impossible to retrieve without risking further fatalities. With heavy hearts, the rescue team marked the shaft as a hazardous area, cautioning future explorers against venturing too close. Mitchell's companions, shaken and devastated, struggled to comprehend how an ordinary caving expedition had ended in such unthinkable tragedy. The haunting memory of Mitchell's final moments, trapped, helpless, and slowly succumbing to the freezing water, would linger with them for the rest of their lives. Ultimately, authorities decided to seal off the cave entrance permanently, acknowledging the immense risk it posed to future cavers. Mitchell's body remained entombed within the dark, unforgiving depths, his tragic fate a somber reminder of the unpredictable dangers lurking in the world of cave exploration. If you found these stories gripping, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more shocking tales of deadly accidents, tragic death sentences, and caving disasters. Let us know in the comments which story left you the most shaken, or if you've ever ventured into caves yourself. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.